All right, so I'm thinking that we change the name of the show to Total Protection Knockdown. And we create
No.
like a protection service like ADP or something like ADT.
Oh,
You know,
we just you beat the bad guys up with pebbles when they break into your home.
when they beat, yes, if they use a pebble to break your window, you throw the pebble back at them.
Okay, I'm getting down with this.
Okay.
Thanks for joining the show, everyone. This is the last one because we're gonna have doing a security agency.
That's right. We're going to make a lot more money that way, too. But thank you for joining for Total Pebble Knockdown, and I am Nathan.
I am Alex.
And this is the show. We already explained that. Anyway, today on Weekly Muse, we gotta talk a little bit about the big elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room would be Microsoft.
A $70 billion acquisition.
A very large 700 billion pound gorilla.
700 billion? That's I think you're adding a zero.
A jillion.
A lot of zeros. I didn't think Microsoft had that much money.
Well, yeah, they don't want to tell you. But anyway, for nearly 70 billion, I think it's actually like 68 point something.
It's 70 billion.
It's basically 70. Microsoft has bought Activision Blizzard earlier in the month. And
hold on. They bought Activision Blizzard King. Because Activision Blizzard also owns the makers of Candy Crush.
And that is probably going to be a big revenue stream for Microsoft, I imagine. In fact, it is very likely that because of that, they are going to try to get more into the mobile market.
Great.
That's terrific. I'm so happy about that. Anyway, so there's been a lot of talk about that, and good for them. The thing I'm mostly wondering about is something a lot of people seem to think that this is a great acquisition for Microsoft, and it is one of the biggest like third-party development houses out there. So they are getting a library, but then some folks are kind of wondering if it was such a great deal, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that aspect to give you a little bit of a reason why I have reservations. It's because of the last big deal that Microsoft made to acquire, we say Bethesda, but it's really ZeniMax, and they paid a little under $8 billion for them. And with that, they not only got Bethesda Softworks, so we've got the Elder Scrolls series, we've got the new Starfield that's coming out, we've got Fallout, all of these IPs, but also all the other game studios that work with them, like Tango, Machine Games, id, Arcane, and like the id game engine is all wrapped up in that too. That's a huge acquisition with a lot of franchises, and it's definitely padding out Game Pass really, really well.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the big arguments I heard from someone was that they weren't super excited about it, but they're really wondering what this is going to look like for Game Pass. Where suddenly your new Call of Duty games, which are, by all accounts, very popular with people still, that is probably going to come to Game Pass, which means for people who don't want to buy a $60 title, they don't have to. But if it's on Game Pass, and they're paying for Game Pass, so instead of paying $60 every time you want a new game, you can pay the $120 or whatever it is a year, and then you can be like, all right, well, now I've got access to all these games.
Yeah, and I can see that, especially with like the Blizzard title. If you had a lot of the Blizzard stuff coming, like if Diablo 4 was like day one release on Game Pass, that would be big. They'd be able to sell a lot of subscriptions for things like that. I think so. But a couple things with that. Right now, Game Pass has roughly, I think last numbers I saw, about 25 million subscribers. And if you figure that people are paying somewhere between maybe $10 and $15 a month for a Game Pass or an Ultimate Game Pass subscription, it's a chunk of change. Like,
it's a small chunk of change.
It's a chunk of change. But let's assume that the games that Activision Blizzard, that they were able to put on their Diablos and the Call of Duties and all of that, were able to get, I don't know, let's just throw out an imaginary number. Let's say increases the Game Pass subscription base by 10 mil, 20 mil, doubles it. Let's say doubles it. Okay.
Okay, sure.
50 million. Okay, so you 25 million new subscribers, about around $300 million in revenue every month. We're looking at like 3 billion, maybe 4. We'll say 4 billion a year for Game Pass subscriptions is what you get out of it. It's still gonna take like almost 20 years, right, to actually rebuild what you put in. And it kind of makes me worried, because what I think will probably happen is if Microsoft gets enough of the market share where they're basically the Netflix of gaming, which is what they want to be, and they create more of a monopoly where there aren't a lot of competition, there isn't a lot of competition in that space, they're probably going to raise what the price tag is.
Sure, but they're also going to raise red flags because monopolies are very frowned upon, especially corporate monopolies.
Less so than they used to be. I mean, by the public standard, yes, but by the government standard.
Government standard, typically, they're like, yeah, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
But it's a gaming company, so I don't know if the government would care as much.
I don't know. They haven't really been saying much. They've been kind of quiet on a lot of these, but they've also they've also been approving some mergers that are pretty major in recent years. But
I think they're more interested, honestly, not that we're getting political here, but I think government is more interested in companies that actually sell services and like things people need, like telecommunications and whatnot, than maybe game company monopolies.
They do seem to be interested in more the tangible assets part of like either factories or energy economies or like automobiles, stuff like that. They seem to be pretty concerned with.
Yeah, things people need more than people just play games.
Yeah.
Anyways,
but no,
we're not talking about government.
It's a point. It's a point. But as Microsoft buys up, because they bought a lot of stuff in recent years, it's not even just the Bethesda and Activision. They bought a lot of other in-house companies. Rare was actually one of the first ones that they got, obviously on a much smaller scale. But something that people were mentioning too is, okay, if you really look at the live, like we can look at Blizzard. Take Blizzard, please. No, take Blizzard. So you have like World of Warcraft, and we've both played World of Warcraft, but the player base is less than it used to be. It's not. It's not pulling in quite as much. But
I mean, I did just look again. They still are getting a day-to-day monthly user logins and players of 1.1 million, which is a large amount of players for a game that is released in 2004.
Yeah. No, it's still impressive. I'm not going to get...
And then you also, I didn't look up the WoW Classic, which I think has actually bigger user base right now. Actually, I will look that up.
I was actually really interested when they had talked about Classic, because I was like, oh, that's kind of nice that they're going back to their roots, but...
All right, World of Warcraft. Okay, no, it's not nearly as many players daily, but it is still another 500,000.
Yeah, so there's something. Yeah, I know that they're going to get revenue off of that, but what else about Warcraft? They're not going to... Are they really going to make, like, the strategy games anymore? I don't know if that's necessarily in their future to do, like... Or to make a World of Warcraft 2. Or, like, something...
Electric Boogaloo.
Electric Boogaloo.
I don't know if...
World of Boogaloo.
I don't know if they'd make a World of Warcraft 2. They keep just pumping out expansions for it.
Yeah.
So I don't see a Warcraft 2 so much as I see just them keeping going and improving it, which is fine.
Right. And the other thing too that they're having a trouble with, I think, is that the MMO market has gotten pretty competitive. There aren't many competitors in it, but the ones that are out there seem to have pretty loyal fan bases, like a Final Fantasy XIV, and those sort of things. So there are people that will usually migrate to one or the other, because massively multiplayer online usually means I'm probably only going to devote time to one of them and not 10.
Generally, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to play that, all of them. But what else does Blizzard have? So Warcraft, Diablo, there's going to be a Diablo 4. That's going to be great. And then they have the one that's going to be the mobile game because we all have phones, as we've found out.
That's still not out?
And I don't think so.
Oh.
But...
Damn.
And is it going to be a microtransaction? Why did I even say that? Of course, there's going to be microtransactions for the Diablo mobile game. And then StarCraft, but honestly, are they going to do anything with StarCraft? I don't...
I mean, to be fair to StarCraft, especially if Microsoft is trying to break into an Eastern demographic a bit more, StarCraft is huge in the Koreas.
They probably wouldn't be wrong to make a new installment of StarCraft. I don't see that being a bad move. But I don't know if they're going to. Oh, and then they have Overwatch, I should have mentioned.
Yes, they have Hearthstone. If people still play that, I have no idea.
I don't know. And Overwatch has had a lot of other competitors now in the market as well. And then you have, like, Activision. So Call of Duty, as you were saying, very big property for them. But Call of Duty's had some problems in the last few years.
Or I don't play Call of Duty. Here's another thing. They also get Modern Warfare is Call of Duty, I guess.
Yeah, it is. It's Modern Warfare and then the new Modern Warfare. And then
here's one I don't think you realize that Activision Blizzard does produce as well, and that is the Crash Bandicoot series.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they own that IP.
They own... Wait a second. Crash Bandicoot, that's... who made that?
Well, now it's Activision Blizzard.
Now it's Activision Blizzard. Okay. Yeah, because I'm trying to think. That was built by one of the... Was that Naughty Dog that built that? I want to say... Yeah. I think that was Naughty Dog originally that built Crash Bandicoot. Or Insomniac. It was one of the houses that was really Sony. And there is the other factor here that's worth talking about, which is that Sony did have a lot of different kinds of contracts with some of the stuff that Activision Blizzard was doing, and Microsoft, I should say, has made it clear that they are going to honor all of those.
Yes, which is nice.
It's nice, and also, like, I was watching the Skill Up video on it, and he was saying that's probably smart, because if you're buying that up, one of the less useful things to do was to try and make everything exclusive to one platform. You'd want to cast as wide a net as possible. So maybe it makes sense if they're now going to keep making games for other systems that aren't just Xbox or PC.
Yeah.
I could see that possibly being useful, but it feels like a very, very large amount of money to recoup. You'd have to expect that either they're going to raise rates very high, or they're expecting to have an absolutely massive influx of user base for Game Pass. They're not really relying on the hardware specs. I don't think they're making a ton of money on Series X's. It's pretty big hardware for the $500 price tag. I think they're doing it mostly to sell the games and the Game Passes and all of that stuff they make revenue on.
Yeah, that's a different thing I heard too entirely as well, is Microsoft doesn't actually make a ton of money on their Xbox and their stuff like that, for instance.
No.
But, like, they make so much money everywhere else in the company, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And it is possible that the reason why they're willing to shell that out is because Microsoft, being with their hands in everything and with the revenue streams that they have elsewhere, can ride out for a very long time, if they're thinking real long term, that amount of money. But I keep coming back to the whole thing with, like, Bethesda, and that they got a lot, not just in the game libraries and the studios, but also in, like the id game engine, like all of the tech that they had behind the scenes.
Just imagine now.
Mm-hmm.
They've got Bethesda and they've got Blizzard. And Blizzard does well with MMOs.
It's true.
For instance, they've nailed that pretty solidly. As much as people are gonna shit all over WoW sometimes, you know, they know what they're doing when they design a game.
Oh yeah.
It's lasted this long because, you know, They have an idea of what they're doing, and they constantly add things and remove things to make the experience better for the majority of players that play it, or to get new players in, which is fine.
Oh, sure.
But then you've got Bethesda, who is like, we're going to make an MMO Fallout, and it's terrible.
Yeah, and I've made the case occasionally that Bethesda Softworks probably shouldn't have been the ones that were actually in charge of that.
No, but so
they
take
put
all
studio,
these different,
yeah.
take all these different studios that they now own, and all these different expertise. If Microsoft were to take full direction of that, and I think their their game director, whoever is in charge of their gaming side, is probably apparently a fairly smart fellow.
I would certainly hope so.
So imagine if you go, all right, well, Blizzard, you're now going to work with Bethesda. Or the Fallout team.
Yeah.
You know, if they do something like that, and like, we want to make this. We want you guys to work together to make it work. To bring like your expertise on one topic and your expertise in another area, and make a game that is better than the sum of its parts.
Yeah. I can see the possibilities. As I think about this, I'm also realizing Microsoft also owns Obsidian. Because of course they do. So now we have who are also
They're
very
still not EA.
They're still not EA. Don't worry, maybe they'll try to buy EA at some point. That would be that would be a pretty big issue in itself too. Although, fun fact, if you have Game Pass, you also have access to EA Play. So they actually already have a contract with EA so that you can play like EA's game library if you have Game Pass too. So it's all coming together. I just found out on my Game Pass I can play the whole Mass Effect Legendary Collection. Which I mean I've played the games before, but yeah, I'll probably want to see what they did to update them. That'd be great.
Probably haven't. Anyways, TLDR. We're watching this space.
We're watching this carefully to see what the evolution of it is, and trying to determine if this was a better deal for Microsoft than Activision. I think it was a good deal for Blizzard, honestly. They were kind of in a... Despite a lot of issues.
Do we know if Bobby Kotick will be being... gone?
Here's all I really know. They said that he is going to remain, for the moment, as essentially the head. But again, something I thought it was interesting when I was watching Skill Up talk about it was that it would be kind of weird. This isn't technically finalized. Microsoft doesn't currently own them yet. They bought it, but it's not till like 23 or something that we're actually going to see a changeover of hands. It would be very weird for them to start dictating the upper management of the company yet.
Right. If you don't fully own and the deal hasn't gone through, you don't get to make those decisions.
No.
However, in the meantime, everybody watching it can go, Microsoft, get rid of this guy.
You probably
and I'm sure
want to.
I'm sure everybody who is looking at this is going, Microsoft, get rid of this guy.
And I had heard some rumblings about the possibility that he'd be a consultant or something, but not necessarily in a management position.
Just hope just leave the industry, please.
Just go away. He makes too much money for him to leave the industry. Oh my god.
I mean, even if he leaves the industry at this point, he's walking away with his life set.
Oh, he's fine. No one's gonna worry about Bobby Kotick.
And no one's gonna think about him, hopefully, either.
Yeah, he's, I mean, they've already gotten some of the people that were in, what was the sacrificial lamb, J. Allen Brack, who had to, like, fall on his sword for a lot of it. But, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen to upper management, but it would be very odd for Microsoft to start making those determinations now. They're going to have to make sure that the whole thing is through and that they've worked out all of the kinks, and I would imagine to try and figure out how to restructure it to bring Activision Blizzard into the fold before they can really determine what the upper management of that company, in terms of the larger scale of things, is going to be. But we'll see. it's a possibility. Anything's a possibility here. So, but yes, biggest acquisition in video games ever. And
yes,
kind of had to talk about it, at least for a little bit. On to happier things, or at least maybe more interesting ones. So, we got a Discord discussions. And this is a topic that was brought up a couple months ago, actually, and has had a long conversation, actually, in our forums, discussing what this actually means. It was originally brought up by Datum, and it was about structured encounters, and we kind of wanted to get a little bit more information about what that was referring to. I think that in the process, we came up with about 5 other topics that we'll have to deal with at some point. but we kind of got a better framework of what Datum was asking, recently writing about. I will read from his post. My original thought was actually around the use of structured encounters by a GM. So, in D&D and similar games, combat is very structured. I guess what I'm asking is, what needs to happen to trigger combat in D&D? This seems obvious, but do you really need the combat rules for a fist fight in a bar? Do hit points matter when someone isn't able to defend? These could be resolved with a different check, or maybe a single combat check. Okay, now I got a good feeling about what's going on here.
Okay.
Okay, so I have seen encounters, and I've probably been in them, where it seems like something relatively simple will take you into, actually Dom had called it tactical mode. I think that's from an more of an old school idea, but generally roll for combat.
Right. Roll for initiative, you're in combat.
Roll for initiative, that activates combat. And I've seen times where literally the second somebody punches or like whips out a sword or something, combat, get that, go those initiative rolls. We're in it. Do you personally think that it needs to be utilized as much as that, or can we size this back a bit?
I think you can size it back. I think if you want it to be a combat, it can be a combat, but if it's more of a cinematic moment, for instance, if you pull a sword out and threaten somebody, it doesn't have to be combat. It can be like, alright, well now you're like, not getting aggro, but you're like, alright, you're almost into combat there. If you decide you want to start stabbing away and there's other people around, or any monsters around, then it could turn into combat. But if you have your sword out, maybe it's just the one person. What if you just stab them through the heart and kill them instantly? Yeah. It's like, roll for murder.
Yeah. Can we have a roll for murder? I don't know if that's a constitution save or athletics.
Like, you're just straight up gonna stab them through the heart? Yeah, I'm just gonna stab them straight through the heart.
Yeah.
I wouldn't in that instance call for it to start combat. It wouldn't be like, alright, well, they're gonna draw their weapon. You'd be like, alright, I stabbed them in the heart.
Right.
It's in cases like that, or maybe if you're holding somebody up, if you as characters are mugging someone. Is that combat?
Right.
Or is that, intimidation, and then maybe you knock them out?
Right. That seems more like a social encounter that has a super aggressive nature to it, but not
an aggressive social encounter.
An aggressive social encounter. Yes, exactly.
And that is the thing. Not all encounters are combat encounters, which I think is part of that structure thing.
Yeah.
Can things turn to combat if you either want them to or if they go south? Yes. They can, and especially D&D is a game where combat is heavily structured and regimented because kind of needs to be in a lot of cases as well. People enjoy that aspect of it, which is why a lot of people have said D&D is a glorified combat simulator sometimes, I think.
Right.
And it's not so many words.
Yeah, and if you did not have a combat component to like a D&D, a lot of the mechanics of D&D would be useless.
Yeah.
If you really think about it. I wouldn't have to worry about rolling to hit. I wouldn't have to worry about rolling for damage. I wouldn't have to worry about how fast I was. For most of it, I really wouldn't require those things if we didn't eventually have a tactical layout. If it was specifically story-driven and only story-driven, a lot of those mechanics could get thrown out. Who really needs spells or to worry about how much damage your spells do or for how long if you're not in a tactical framework where you need them? It's not nearly as heavy. But I would say that it makes sense to have an actual roll for initiative, get into combat, if this is legitimately a combat scenario. If you're not really looking to be in that, if it's not like an actual combat piece, I don't really see the purpose of it. I'm in a bar fight. I wouldn't even really consider a bar fight to be that. If I need to start considering, though, where I am on a map relative to everybody else, then I kind of need the tactical aspect. I need it so that I can figure out where I am and how fast I can act. But if it's just I have a disagreement at a bar, or I decided to join a boxing competition, I don't even know if you really need it for that. I get into a ring. Do you want to do a constitution save because they're trying to hit you and do a strength save or whatever?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say, roll with your base attack bonus plus your strength bonus and then roll your damage for something like that.
Sure.
I'd be like, all right, if you have a relevant skill, use it.
Right.
And otherwise you're using like either your stats or maybe you just narrate it. It's like, all right, the guy goes to throw a punch at you. What do you want to do? Have them kind of narrate slightly what they would like to do. I'm going to dodge to the side and give them a left hook or something like that. And be like, all right, roll to see how easy that is for you to do, where maybe the more, and I know other systems do this, where it's like the better you explain something, the better your possibility is to do this.
Right.
So it's like, all right, well, you explain that, and it's like, so we'll give you a little bit of a bonus to that roll, so roll and add +2 or something like that.
Certainly, yeah. I think from a GM's perspective too, I think it's going to amount to a lot of flow of the game, because we've talked about it on the show, is about the idea that if you have a combat relative to the time that you're in it takes a very long time to actually deal with.
Yeah.
And if you're doing storylines, it might take you like 10 minutes to explain what you do for a month. depending on how much. Yeah.
Time scale is usually 6 seconds per round. And I think the most anything D&D related or based, and that means you've got 10 rounds in a minute, and combat doesn't usually last 10 rounds.
No. But
combat does take like 20-30 minutes. Out of game.
Oh yeah, and if you think about like one round, so 6 seconds is a round, but you're probably spending a good 10 minutes to get everyone around a table doing their actions, or possibly more depending on how many enemies are involved. So it's like you're in bullet time when you get into tactical mode, and there's really no way around that. I always thought it was funny, though, if you're trying to have conversations in the middle of a combat, if your conversation takes more than 6 seconds, you technically couldn't do it in a round.
Yeah, I mean, most conversations don't take more than 6 seconds if they're just during combat.
Sure.
I would think. Unless you're trying to hold a monologue.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Having someone try to do a monologue in the middle of combat, and you can only do 6 seconds of the monologue. That
would actually be really great if you had your big bad evil guy in your combat with him, starts his monologue off on his turn, does like a sentence or two, stops, and then continues it on his next round.
Next round, yeah, that'd be great. Just a little bit of realism to let's function with the rules as written here. The other thing, though, I think of as from a GM's perspective, though, is you might end up in tactical combat when you don't necessarily need to be, if you don't have a lot left scheduled for that session, and you need to have a little time You need to pad out the time a little bit.
I feel like that's what the random encounter tables in 3.5 and whatnot were for.
Probably.
It's like, do you need to pad out your time? Do you need to make more stuff for your players to do so you can wing it better?
Yeah.
Have some random tables.
Right. Since we're on that subject, I start thinking about the opposite end of this, where we have to end an encounter. I mean, technically, if your enemies are defeated and there's no one else to fight, that usually means that you end the encounter.
That means you've ended combat, you do your victory poses, you hear the victory do 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 do.
Hey, listen! And then...
That just blew out your mic.
Hey, listen!
No, it just sounds really weird when you do that. You're gonna have to cut that out
entirely. Listen! Anyway, so... Well, we had to make a Zelda reference. Anyway, but... realistically, when you get down to a certain... it becomes more obvious that you're going to win. Could we actually just end combat and start just doing a couple simple rolls to resolve the rest of it? You know?
Roll for victory.
Well, if you had a case where, like, okay, the Goblin Horde is pretty much done, and there's a few left, and the idea that they're going to somehow get the upper hand on your party now is pretty minimal at best. Or I go to do a sleep spell, because of course I do. Put everybody to... Technically, they're still alive. They could wake up, but do we really need to keep padding out the combat so that your party can get to the tower, to get up the stairs, to where the goblins are, and secure them? And do we have to do that in rounds? Or can we just say, hey, let's move out of combat. How do you want to resolve this, and see if a couple rolls will take care of it at that point?
Yeah, you could be like, all right, the armies are retreating. Would you like to end combat? Would you like to chase them down? Would you like to just murder them? What do you want to do? You could always give the players a few options for ways to do that. That isn't just structured combat. All right, you're moving 10 feet. All right, next round, 10 feet. Or whatever your speed is. It's like that just gets nitty gritty, and well, I mean, if you're looking to pad out your time, it works.
Sure.
But I don't think that's necessary.
No.
It's like, all right, you see him retreating, what would you like to do?
Right.
You can be like, all right, well, we're going to let him go, or we're going to chase him down. And it's like, all right, well, they're retreating, so they're not fighting, so you can chase them down. And it's not really combat. I don't think you could be like, all right, you could do it as like roll for pursuit.
Okay.
Like, make an athletics check to see if you can catch up to them.
Okay. Yeah.
And then be like, all right, you catch up to them. Be like, do you want to murder them? Do you want to knock them out? What do you want to do? And then be like, all right, I want to do this. And then be like, all right, make a roll for that. And if they're retreating and they're goblins, let's say, you could easily just stab in the back and murder them if you're aiming to murder them.
Sure. Yeah. I think any time that you have a pretty weighted combat scenario, or what would be a weighted combat scenario, you can probably resolve it without actually having to do a tactical mode of any kind. Again, I want to punch somebody randomly at a bar. I don't think that's a really weighted combat issue, where we have to start really doing rolls to determine how bad this is. So, in terms of you as a GM, what would you say is a good percentage of time to be spending in tactical or in combat relative to the rest of the game?
Oh, I have no idea. That really depends on what your game is structured for, what you're planning to do, what your players would like to do, and honestly, what you have planned.
Right. I'll just throw out 25%. I think maybe a quarter of the time you could be in combat, because otherwise it gets bogged down really easy.
Sure.
And it depends. It does depend on how story driven it is. If you really want to have a story driven campaign, it might be less. But if you want to do dungeon crawls, you're probably going to be in tactical a whole lot.
Yes, because every 5 feet you're moving, you're scanning for traps. You are looking for everything. I did. I'm still doing the essentials kit with my son and Ray, and one of the things Ray said to me is going, if I had known I was gonna be making this many perception checks, I would have taken it as a skill.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, well, yes, you do use it a lot because you're trying to see things. You're seeing how well you notice things. And lots of things need to be noticed. So understandable. But there are other skills that are important too, but perception, especially when you're doing something that's got traps or doors or things to search for, is going to be something that is used a lot.
Yeah. And it also, there are going to be characters that benefit from not being in combat, and ones that are going to be very combat oriented. On that note of perception, like Snowball had a passive perception of 25. He's very good at that, or investigation I think was 27. He's going to be very good at things that are not combat related. Second combat comes in, not so much, but he was basically built as an investigator, not as a warrior or something like that. So it might depend on the fun that you're having as a character. Even though dungeon crawls, if you're coming into it and every 5 seconds I have to deal with a goblin, I'm thinking that maybe some of those could be resolved without having to actually get into combat. Like, I could do a sneak skill, sneak by them, and then roll for a backstab or something like that. Maybe I could do a social skill. I think it mostly has to do with what kind of game you're running, what the GM might want to do, and how much of a flow I think that's really what it comes down to, is about flow of game and how much we want to stop what we're doing for the narrative and story and the progression to do a tactical, because it is going to take a lot of time. So, any other thoughts on that matter before we move on?
None at all.
Great.
This is our kind of take on the entire topic as well. There's obviously more that could be said on it. There's a lot of other things that could go with it, and if you would like to add more in the Discord, feel free to join in that discussion.
Oh yes.
Which may or may not still be ongoing when this episode comes out.
Yes.
But we're always happy to hear other people's thoughts on things as well, or to discuss things further. Even if we do have a podcast format for it, so we don't necessarily have to type our thoughts out.
Sure. And I will read the last little thing that Adam had sent over too, because we are still having this conversation. It's been going on for a while now, but Adam says, I've been thinking about these questions as I learn new systems. I've always run high combat fantasy games like Star Wars and D&D, so learning Call of Cthulhu, I think this is the reason why he brings it up, has been really interesting. It places value on entirely different activities while still having structured rules for combat. Yeah, Call of Cthulhu is more interested in the investigative aspects and the sanity systems and stuff like that.
Right.
The narrative.
Think in a similar fashion, World of Darkness is more of an investigative game.
There's an argument to be made that, like, Vampire the Masquerade doesn't focus as nearly as much on combat.
No, but I think both those games, the combat can be incredibly lethal.
Oh yes, because they need to get it over and done with quickly.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very similar to the Warhammer Fantasy and the Warhammer 40k RPGs. Mm-hmm. Not familiar with the newest systems for them, but the ones that I have played in are, there's combat really bogs you down because there's just so many skill checks and things you can roll for, but the combat is incredibly lethal, so you could end a combat fairly quick because everybody is rolling the same amount of damage.
Right, exactly. So yeah, the other thing that's going to determine how much combat you want to do is how deadly it is, because you might not actually want to get into combat. Also, side note, thought for another topic at another time, is about the lethality of combat determining how much we actually want to get into combat.
Yes.
Or if it promotes other systems like stealth or social encounters.
Well, on that note, one thing I generally do for my D&D games when I run them and have done for a while is I don't allow. I did it in one game, or I think I want to do it in one of the systems I have an idea for. Is that healing magic is more ritualistic, so it's not something you can easily use in combat.
Right. Gotta start making those health potions.
Yeah, health potions are fine. They take a turn action, but not giving players the ability to use spells in combat would definitely, or not use healing spells in combat, would be a detriment, of course, in certain systems, but it would be like, all right, well, you can't focus on mending a bone. Or suturing that up correctly in combat. It takes a lot of concentration, so it's like, all right, well, if you want to heal, you need to be outside of combat, so you should retreat.
Right, exactly. So, thought for another time, we can get into it. I'll try to make a note. But thank you for your question, and yeah, this conversation has gone on for a bit, and we will probably...
It's gone on long enough. Stop talking about it.
No, we can talk about it. We can talk about it more, because out of all the conversations we've had on Discord, I think this one has unlocked more other topics to discuss than any other, so we appreciate it.
New topic unleashed.
A new topic has entered the arena. Perfect. We have one more thing, and it's a little bit off topic, which makes sense because it's one more thing. But this is pretty off topic, Alex. So bear with me.
Yes, you told me you have a song stuck in your head.
I have a song stuck in my head. Well, I have a few, but there's one particular... I have a lot of songs stuck in my head. Girl from Ipanema is still in... The point is, though... So, I watched a movie earlier in the month that apparently everyone watched anyway, and it was called Encanto. It was an animated film from Disney, and it was on Disney Plus, which is the reason why everyone watched it.
Is that new one with the Latina?
It was set in Colombia, the last century.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's set in Colombia.
I think I'd seen some pictures of it.
But anyway, what you need to know is it was set like during turn of the last century, I want to say, in Colombia, and the music that's done, there were like 8 original songs that are pretty catchy and are
of course
kind
it's
of
Disney.
viral.
It's Disney.
And not only is it Disney, it's Lin-Manuel Miranda that actually wrote all the music, who is Hamilton? Remember the Hamilton?
No.
Anyway, Lin-Manuel Miranda, fairly famous from Broadway, wrote all of the songs for this. And the music is really what got a lot of people interested in it. The movie's nice. The movie's really good. And the colors are great. Animation has gone really off the charts lately in terms of what they can do with the technology. But the songs really stuck in people's heads. There's a lot of catchy ones. There's a lot of bops.
A lot of earworms.
A lot of earworms. A lot of earworms. But there was one particular one that seems to have gotten the most attention, like in terms of hit number 4 on the Hot 100 Billboard charts. Big. Called We Don't Talk About Bruno. Now...
Okay, see, I haven't seen the movie, and I haven't heard any of these songs, as far as I'm aware. But I have seen, I think, memes or posts about We Don't Talk About Bruno.
So good, I get to explain
on either Facebook or Twitter.
Yeah.
I have seen that phrase, and I did not know that's what it was from.
Yes, it is. And so I get to explain this to you now, because it's kind of fun. It's actually a lot of fun. And I think that it actually teaches us a lot about design, which is where this is eventually going to go. But something that's interesting about the song is that if you look at a lot of Disney's canon, and a lot of the songs that became big radio hits, they could be taken away from the actual movie without losing a lot of context. You know, Whole New World, Party World, Let It Go, Circle of Life. They don't really have to be in the movie for you to understand them, for them to be a song. And so they can become radio hits. We Don't Talk About Bruno, though, is completely a narrative song about the characters in the movie and what they can do. and and actually progresses the story forward, which is an odd thing for a song that would become very popular, because you wouldn't necessarily think that. It has to have a lot of context in order for you to understand that.
I mean, you can understand Grease Lightning.
Oh, I can.
Without seeing the movie Grease.
Yeah, you can, but when I say it's integral to the story, I mean, like, the story progression and the characters and what they can do is all important to the song itself.
Okay, well, here's my question for that before you keep going on.
Sure.
Is it a musical movie? Is it a movie that if you were to see a Broadway adaptation, it would work?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think a Broadway adaptation would work. Yes.
So I think in that case, a song that has strong character narration works. Because, theater in Broadway typically is very music-based. You can tell a story, and then there are song pieces, but they are narrative song pieces. For instance, the song everyone knows from the movie or Broadway show, Rent.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
525,600 minutes. That is sung by the characters in the Broadway show. It is integral to the characters in the Broadway show, but it is also a smash hit.
For sure.
Because it is just something that you don't actually need to have seen Rent to understand.
Right. I would say that, like, one, maybe because it was Miranda that came from a musical background, and a lot of the people came from a musical background, Encanto probably does work pretty well as a musical or as a stage production. But what I would say is that if you were to just listen to this song without the context of everything else, you'd probably be a little lost as to what's going on. Because it does have a lot, like, you'd have to probably listen to the song at the beginning that explains what everybody does to make this make sense. Which is a little hard if you haven't actually listened to it. But here's the thing that's interesting. People were trying to figure out why this was the one that people landed on or had a bigger reaction to, because it kind of came as a surprise for a lot of people. And I think I know why. And so I'm going to explain the structure of the song.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's have a music breakdown.
Yeah, we're doing Song Exploder.
The new segment title is Music Breakdown.
Music Breakdown. Okay.
Not really, though. But the episode may be titled We Don't Talk About Bruno.
Yeah, or we got to talk about Bruno.
Oh, yes.
We got to talk
the
about
segment
Bruno
itself, because, people will search for that.
Oh, they certainly will. But so the context you basically need is that everybody in the Madrigal family has powers except for the lead character, who is Mirabelle. Everybody else has gifts. And Bruno was the uncle that basically could see the future. He could prophesy the future, and it would happen. So the whole thing about We Don't Talk About Bruno is that one day he disappeared, and nobody talks about him except everybody's got to talk about him because he's like the black sheep of the family, and there's, like most families, you got to talk about the guy that we never talk about. So the progression of the story is basically everybody talking about the prophecies that he made about them in each verse.
Okay.
But the verses are all to the same rhythm, basically, but they work in different ways for each one of those verses. So the first one that you have is more of a duet.
It was my wedding day.
The second one is really rapid, really fast, almost speed rap in terms of how fast the line progression goes. The third one is actually done in syncopated rhythm, so it is done off of the beats, not on the beats, for the singing parts. The bridge is actually the townspeople talking about these prophecies that he made about their goldfish dying and them losing their hair and stuff.
He told me my fish would die the next day. Dead. No.
And then the last one, which is supposed to be her sister, is actually very minimalistic. They kind of just tone it down to like just a couple basic musical parts for her section. Use this same rhythm for a lot of different pieces, but that brings you to the end. And in the end, they actually sing, interestingly enough, in a term called madrigal, which is the same name as the family, which is when you take all of those individual vocal parts and you sing them at the same time. So now you have essentially 4 different vocal sections singing the same rhythm at the same time, but you can actually tell that everybody's singing differently. But now it feels like a cohesive narrative, where everybody's talking at the same time about the same basic subject matter, but everybody, since they did the lines differently in that rhythm, they're still able to be distinct. Madrigal is actually meant to be tapestry, like essentially a vocal tapestry. You're layering it on top of each other. And I think that's the thing that people really hit on, because you notice, like, when people are commenting, it's like that moment when it drops, it gets kind of insane, because there's so much going on at once, but it all makes comprehensive sense, even though everybody's talking at the same time. So the reason why I say I started thinking about this in terms of design was I thought about different systems that you have when you're playing a game, when you're designing anything, really. You'll have all of these different systems, and they work as individual systems, but you also have to have them work in tandem. And I started thinking about the games that really kept me engaged for long periods of time, and they were the ones that seemed to take interesting systems that felt like their own thing, but could work in conjunction with each other at the same time. Skyrim is an interesting game if you like the combat, but when you can integrate the crafting and the narrative parts and the exploration parts with the combat, and they can all work in tandem, then it gets like much more interesting, much more fascinating. And so I started thinking about like take a D&D or anything like that, because we were just talking about it a second ago. It's great that you have the combat, but can you take things like the combat, integrate them in at the same time with everything to essentially create a design tapestry of sorts? Do you see what I'm saying?
Kind of.
Okay. What I'm trying to get to is that when you're designing, I started to think, and this is the question that I kind of pass along to people, is there a moment, can you cite the moment where you could see these disparate systems in a game, some all of a sudden cohesively come together as one thing and work together to enhance the individual parts of that game? And I can kind of see it. I've seen it in different games where you can do one thing and another thing kind of adds on to it, increases it, brings more value to it, and you can do them at the same time. But I don't know if that's every gamer's experience, if that's every designer's experience to create those systems that work in tandem with each other.
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier for video games to get away with that. Because you can also integrate your sound design in with the integral moments, a la, as much as we don't like it, Dark Souls, which some people cite as a rhythm game.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
Where the beats of the music match up with the beats of the combat for bosses and stuff, which is a really interesting design choice. To be like, all right, well, here are all your sound cues that if you are paying attention, you can see this mash really well together and like seamlessly. I know Austin Horrigan of The Science on Game Theory's channel did a breakdown of that, and he was like, yeah, if you take this and you figure out like the time signature of this boss fight,
yeah,
it's like it's in 4/4 time, so every time it does the beats like this, you can tell what's going to happen because you're measuring, you're counting beats in your head. You're going with the rhythm of the music, and so is the boss. And it makes those fights a lot easier. So that is, I assume, one of those ideas that you're talking about, having meshed together really well, layered on top of each other, that are just are really neat design choice. As much as I
Right.
cannot play Dark Souls and actually am not terrible at knowledge of music from taking 4 years of chorus, that's not how I like to play my games, however, so I'm bad at it. If I wanted to play a rhythm game, I'd play a rhythm game. If I wanted to play... Yeah. But I think in video games, it's a little bit harder to layer certain systems together like that.
Okay. Yeah, I start thinking about things like, I think platformers are probably a good example of that, I want to say, or maybe Metroidvanias, because there's exploration systems that are in there that also work with the combat, and they're going to start with giving you a few basic components of that, and they're going to start layering on other mechanics as it goes on to access different areas of the world, different mechanics, but then those mechanics can still work in the overarching structure of it. It's not like independent. I think that might be the reason why. Just tell me what you think about that. I think that might be the reason why when you get into like the lock-picking mini games or like the hacking mini games in a lot of games, people feel like it breaks up the whole rhythm because they feel completely devoid from the rest of the game. Like it feels like it's not in, like you've just entered another game completely that doesn't have an integration or is part of, back to that whole thing, part of the tapestry of the game. It's like, okay, we're going to take a respite and go to this completely other corner so that we can do that. It doesn't feel integrated, which might be the reason it takes you out of that experience. But I'd say Metroids are probably a good version of that. I see that a lot with platformers. I think Mario's probably a good version. There's a lot of mechanics that are going on in that, but they start very simple and they build off of it over time. RPGs, I think, are great for that regard because, they're starting you off with some basic leveling and, design choices, and then they start giving you other stats and other abilities that will unlock new options, and it all works in conjunction with the original things that you were able to do. And I keep trying to think of like that specific moment in a game where everything kind of flows together and you start to see those integrated systems. And I don't necessarily know if I can pinpoint it myself. Yeah. Like that one moment where it's like, oh, everything locked together all of a sudden. And now I understand it. I can point to examples like with Borderlands, with both having a leveling system that's going on at the same time as a loot system, and seeing that those kind of feed into each other, stuff like that. But I can't give you an example of like the moment where that all clicked for me, and I was like, oh, I see how everything works together.
I think on the tabletop side of things, tabletop board games that aren't specifically RPGs might actually have an easier time layering these systems together.
Sure.
To make more comprehensive and more, the sum of the parts are equal to more than what they are individually.
Mm-hmm.
I think games like maybe Pandemic, for instance.
Okay. Sure.
Where the systems layered upon each other, like, all right, well, everything separately is fine, and you can understand how they work. But once you see them work together, you're like, oh, like once you get that infection, and it's like it hits here, and then it spreads to here, and then those ones burst, and it spreads even more, and you're just like,
oh yeah, and you're thinking about that in the context of what you already know your characters are able to do, where everybody is on the map, and realistically how fast you can get to one area or another.
Right.
So yeah.
So as far as tabletop, something like that, where you can just see the cascading effect of these systems playing on top of each other and what they can do, I think that is more along that line as well.
Mm-hmm.
Where until they come together, you don't really experience it the same way.
Yeah.
And once it comes together, it's just the
In some ways, I think that's also an important thing to remember when you're adding on mechanics or expansions onto your game. because like I think to Carcassonne, which I play and I really enjoy that one, there's a lot of expansions to it. But when you get to those expansions, they not only have to add something to the game, but they have to integrate very well to what you've already established. You put the river expansion on, it still has to work in the framework of the game that you had to begin with for the tile laying system, and in some ways has to enhance that experience in some way, shape, or form. You put a bishop down and that becomes one of your meeples. It has to not just work in the context of getting abbeys and getting points from it, but the reason why you have it, and also how you can utilize it better to make the game work and make the game flow better than it would have before as you introduce those new mechanics and those new expansions. So, but I'm actually interested, I know it's not a crit thing, but I am interested in like what the general consensus, if anyone wants to leave, comments either in the video or over on our Discord about what that moment is, if you can pinpoint one for me about when all those systems seem to integrate together. Because after listening to the song about 20 times, I can't stop. I started to think, there's got to be something I need to take away from this that I was not previously getting. And I started to realize it feels like the design choices for that musical piece speak volumes for something we can take away for design in general. So.
Very nice.
There you go.
We're going to have to add a small 5-second clip of the song somewhere in this.
Oh yeah,
video.
and we also ended up talking a lot about Bruno.
We did. Is it Bruno Mars?
No, it's not Bruno Mars. It's John Leguizamo, actually.
Oh, well, shit.
Sorry to tell you.
Fantasy ruins.
Sorry. I know you were looking for your Bruno Mars musical, but unfortunately, we didn't get it. We don't talk about Bruno Mars musicals.
No, we don't.
Talk about those, it's all. Okay, folks. So, this has been yet another episode of Total Pebble Knockdown, an integral tapestry of ideas that is brought to the gaming sector. And Alex, if people wanted to look at more of the magical tapestry of chorus ideas that we have for the episodes, where can they go?
To a museum where they have tapestries, or you could go to totalpebbleknockdown.com.
Absolutely. While you are there, you can check out all the episodes of the show, as well as any of our other side projects that we have going on, and you can even click on our Patreon button, and you will be able to, if you become a patron, get our episodes in full video form before the individual segments even go out, as well as some bonus content, which is mostly the off-topic stuff that is more off-topic than our normal off-topic stuff. But
We're really selling it hard as it. If you like us rambling,
if you like the rambling,
become a patron.
The rambly bits are all Patreon stuff. That's not just the rambly stuff on air. Think about that for a second. As well as some early releases for the other things that we normally release. So, you do that. If you have any questions or comments, or if you have any ideas for discussion topics like we did on this episode, you can either find us on Discord. It's a public Discord, easy enough to find. Links should be in the description of the video as well. And, in the correct ones now, the correct ones. Or you can find us on social media. I'm at Titanium.
I am at EXP Limited, and the show is at Pebble Knockdown.
Absolutely. So you can catch us over there. In the meantime, Alex, do you do chorus anymore? You don't do chorus anymore.
No, I'm not in school anymore, Nathan.
Oh, that's true. Well, I thought you might just do it for the lols.
No.
No. That's okay. I never did chorus because I'm bad at singing.
Yeah, this is why we don't have a singing channel, Nathan.
Oh, can you imagine if we had...
I would like to not.
Treble Pebble Knockdown.
Oh my god. Treble Pebble Knockdown.
There you go.
Treble Piano Knockoff.
No, keyboard.
Treble Keyboard Knockdown?
Treble piano keyboard. That actually kind of works. Thank you for joining us on Treble Piano Keyboard. Until next time. Goodbye for now.
Bye.
All right, we're gonna end that before I actually want to make Treble Piano Keyboard.
Ray gave me a stern look at that.